Saturday should have felt light. Celebratory, even. It was supposed to be one of those afternoons where you smile through small talk, eat too much cake, and drive home feeling grateful for family. Instead, it became the day my 14-year marriage began to unravel in the most public way imaginable. It was my sister-in-law Natalie's baby gathering, the kind of event people photograph for social media before they even bother saying hello to the host. Her parents, the Richardsons, hosted it at their sprawling colonial house in Riverside Heights, the kind of neighborhood where every lawn looks professionally manicured and every car in the driveway costs more than my annual salary at Henderson and Associates. Extended family, friends, neighbors, everyone was there, buzzing with excitement about the baby on the way. The air was thick with perfume, laughter, and the constant click of phone cameras capturing every staged moment. The Richardson house looked like something out of a magazine spread. Soft pastel decorations draped across every surface, silver and white balloons floating lazily near the vaulted ceiling, gifts stacked like carefully arranged bricks around the marble coffee table. There was even a ridiculously elaborate centerpiece made entirely of premium diapers, arranged to look like a 3-tier wedding cake, complete with silk ribbons and tiny decorative rattles. I stood near the French doors leading to the dining room, holding a small wrapped box in my hands, baby clothes I'd picked out myself at Baby First in downtown Portland. I'd spent nearly an hour in that store, carefully selecting soft cotton onesies in neutral colors, a tiny knitted blanket, and a set of those impossibly small socks that always seemed to get lost in the dryer. I felt quietly proud that I'd put genuine thought into the gift, that I hadn't just grabbed something generic off a registry. That feeling of pride didn't last long. Karen, my wife of 14 years, stood near the refreshment table talking to Natalie. They were laughing about something, heads close together in that conspiratorial way women do at these gatherings. I was about to walk over and join them when Karen leaned in toward Natalie and murmured something under her breath, not quite quiet enough for the words to stay private. If I'd married someone with bigger ambitions, we'd have something like this too. The words landed like a physical blow to my chest. I didn't react outwardly. Years of dealing with tense negotiations in my role as senior contract analyst at Henderson and Associates had taught me how to keep my expression completely neutral, to never let opposing counsel see when they'd landed a hit. My face remained calm, polite, perhaps even slightly pleasant. But inside, something cold and heavy settled in my stomach. Natalie's eyes immediately found mine across the room. She knew I'd heard. Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she quickly looked away. Karen, however, didn't seem to notice or care that her voice had carried. She gestured expansively around the room, her diamond bracelet, a gift from her parents on our 10th anniversary, catching the afternoon light. "This is exactly how I imagined starting a family," she said casually, as if commenting on the weather. "Not cutting corners from the beginning. Cutting corners. We'd been married for 14 years. We'd built a life together in our modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house in Maplewood Terrace. We'd traveled to 7 different countries. We'd supported each other through career changes and family losses. We'd laughed together, cried together, planned our futures together. And apparently, I was the compromise, the settling, the man she chose when the better options didn't work out." Natalie tried desperately to redirect the conversation, awkwardly commenting on how delicious the buttercream cake looked, asking about the caterer, anything to pull Karen away from this dangerous line of conversation. But Karen brushed it off with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. "Oh, I'm just being honest," she said with a light laugh. "We should all be able to speak freely with family, right?" The rest of the afternoon blurred together into a series of disconnected moments. Games were played. Guess the baby food flavor, measure Natalie's belly with ribbon, all the usual baby shower activities. Cake was served on delicate china plates. Laughter bounced off the walls, genuine and forced in equal measure. I watched my wife charm strangers, compliment outfits, smile brightly for photographs, all while knowing she'd just reduced our entire life together to a disappointment she barely tolerated. I stood there holding my half-eaten slice of vanilla cake, feeling like I was watching everything through a pane of glass. Then Natalie's husband, Gregory, started talking about his recent career developments. He worked in pharmaceutical sales for Prescott Medical Solutions, and apparently business was booming. A major promotion, a substantial raise, a new company car, some imported luxury sedan I'd never heard of, stock options and incentive packages that made my steady government contractor salary look like pocket change. Karen's entire demeanor transformed. She lit up. "Truly, genuinely lit up in a way I hadn't seen her respond to anything I'd said or done in months. "Oh my God, Gregory, that's incredible," she gushed, touching his arm in that casual way that somehow felt too familiar. "Your family is so lucky to have someone who can really take care of things." That word, really, was delivered softly, almost thoughtfully. But it cut clean through whatever remaining illusions I'd been holding onto about my marriage. On the drive home, Karen barely spoke. Our silver Honda Accord, practical, reliable, paid off 2 years early, felt suffocatingly small after the expansive Richardson house. The late afternoon sun blazed through the windshield as we merged onto Highway 84, heading back toward our neighborhood on the east side of Portland. Her phone glowed continuously in her lap as she scrolled through what I assumed was social media or text messages. Every few seconds, she'd pause to save an image. Designer nurseries with custom murals, luxury nursery furniture that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment, elaborate children's playrooms that looked like miniature palaces. I focused on the road, hands at 10 and 2, maintaining exactly 5 miles over the speed limit like always. Responsible, predictable, safe. Apparently, safety wasn't impressive. Halfway through the 30-minute drive, she finally spoke. "Today was really inspiring," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Makes you think about where you're headed in life." The phrasing was careful, deliberate. She didn't say where we're headed. She said, "You're headed." I didn't ask her to clarify who she meant by you. "The Richardsons certainly know how to host an event," I replied neutrally, taking the exit toward Maplewood Terrace. "It's not just about hosting," she said, a hint of impatience creeping into her voice. "It's about having the resources to do things right, to not have to worry about budgets and restrictions and limitations." I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, but said nothing. We pulled into our driveway, the same driveway I'd repaired myself last summer, spending 2 weekends breaking up the old concrete and laying new pavers. The house looked exactly as we'd left it that morning, neat, well-maintained, modest. A comfortable 1,800 square feet that we owned outright after I'd aggressively paid down the mortgage. Karen was out of the car before I'd even turned off the engine. "I have a headache," she announced, already walking toward the front door. "I'm going to lie down." She went straight upstairs to our bedroom and closed the door. I heard the lock click, a small sound that somehow felt enormously significant. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my gift box from the baby shower still in my hand, then walked to my study at the back of the house. It was a small room, barely 10 by 12 feet, but it was mine. Built-in bookshelves I'd installed myself. A solid oak desk I'd found at an estate sale and refinished. My certificates from the University of Washington and my professional credentials framed on the wall. I set down the gift box and opened my laptop, pulling up the financial spreadsheets I maintained religiously. Every account, every investment, every asset we owned, tracked and updated monthly. Mortgage, paid in full, 3 years ahead of schedule. $347,000 home value, 0 debt. Savings, $87,000 in our joint account, growing by $2,200 every month. Retirement accounts, maxed out contributions for the past 6 years. My 401k at Henderson and Associates was approaching $340,000. My Roth IRA was fully funded annually. Insurance policies, life insurance, disability insurance, umbrella policy, all in place, all paid on time. College fund, already started, even though we didn't have children yet. $23,000, set aside in a 529 plan. Emergency fund, 6 months of expenses, liquid and accessible. Everything stable. Everything responsible. Everything planned and executed with care. Apparently, stability wasn't impressive enough. That night, lying in bed while Karen slept beside me, or pretended to sleep, I made a choice that would change everything. No confrontation. No emotional arguments about what I'd heard at the baby shower. No demands for explanation or reassurance. I would simply observe. I'd spent my entire career at Henderson and Associates analyzing contracts, finding the truth buried in carefully worded clauses, identifying discrepancies between what people claimed and what they actually intended. I was good at it. Very good. I'd saved my company millions by catching details others missed. It was time to apply those same skills to my own life. The next morning, Sunday, Karen acted completely normal. She came downstairs in her weekend yoga outfit, expensive Lululemon gear that I'd never questioned, and started the coffee maker. When I entered the kitchen, she smiled and kissed me on the cheek. "You've been so quiet lately," she said, pouring cream into her mug. Everything okay? Just work, I replied, returning to my usual script. Big contract review coming up this week. She responded, already scrolling through her phone again. Don't work too hard. Over the next week, I paid attention. Really paid attention. Patterns I'd previously ignored or rationalized away became impossible to miss. Karen avoided social events where people might ask what she did with her days. When my colleague Janet invited us to a dinner party on Tuesday, Karen claimed to have a headache. When our neighbors, the Bradleys, invited us to their anniversary barbecue on Friday, she suddenly remembered a conflicting appointment with her sister. She showed visible disinterest whenever I talked about projects I was proud of. On Wednesday, I mentioned that I'd successfully renegotiated a major vendor contract that would save Henderson and Associates approximately $1.2 million over 3 years. She'd looked up from her phone long enough to say, "That's nice," before returning to whatever she was reading. Yet she came alive, genuinely animated, whenever someone mentioned money, promotions, career advancement, or expensive trips. Her book club friend Veronica called on Thursday evening to discuss their upcoming trip to the Bahamas. Karen spent 45 minutes on that call, laughing and engaged in a way I rarely saw anymore. Wednesday evening, I heard her on the phone in the kitchen. I was in the living room, supposedly watching television, but the house's open floor plan meant sound carried more than most people realized. She didn't realize how well I could hear her. "I know," she laughed, her voice warm and conspiratorial. "You and Gregory really figured it out. Big house in the suburbs, private school plans already in place, 2 new cars. I keep telling myself that being practical is enough, but—" A pause. She was listening to Natalie on the other end. "He's a good man," Karen continued, and something in my chest tightened at the past tense feeling of that statement. "Really reliable. Safe. Consistent. But sometimes, late at night, I honestly wonder what would have happened if I'd waited. If I'd been more patient instead of settling for security. 14 years of marriage, reduced to a hypothetical regret. A what-if scenario where I was the wrong choice. I sat very still on the couch, television playing to an empty room, processing what I'd just heard. Thursday night, Karen casually mentioned over dinner, leftover pasta that I'd made the previous evening, how much Natalie's nursery must have cost. "Gregory said they spent about $30,000 just on the nursery," she said, twirling pasta on her fork. "Custom mural, imported furniture, smart monitoring system, everything top of the line." "That seems excessive," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "A nursery doesn't need to cost more than a used car." She set down her fork a little too forcefully. When money isn't a concern, people can afford to dream. They can give their children the best from day one. Some people prioritize building savings and security instead of spending on appearances, I said. She didn't answer. Just picked up her plate and carried it to the sink, leaving me sitting alone at the kitchen table we'd bought together at IKEA 9 years ago. Friday morning, everything changed. I'd left for the gym at 5:30 a.m. as usual, but 15 minutes into my workout, I realized I'd forgotten my water bottle on the kitchen counter. I decided to run back home quickly. It was only a 7-minute drive. I unlocked the front door as quietly as possible, not wanting to wake Karen if she was still sleeping. But as I stepped into the hallway, I heard her voice from the upstairs bedroom. She was pacing. I could hear the distinctive creak of the floorboards near the window, and talking on the phone. I stopped moving, stopped breathing. "I love him," Karen was saying, her voice carrying down the stairs. "I really do love him. But love doesn't buy the life I want. Love doesn't pay for the kind of house I imagined living in, or the vacations I see other people taking, or the future I want to give my children. I can't raise kids feeling limited and restricted every single day." A pause. Then, maybe I just need to push him harder. Really push. Give him an ultimatum about career advancement. Men need pressure sometimes, don't they? They need to understand what's at stake. That's when I understood with perfect, crystalline clarity. She wasn't unhappy with circumstances. She wasn't struggling with disappointment or working through difficult feelings. She was strategizing, planning, calculating her next move like I was a business problem to be solved. I walked back out the front door, closed it silently, got in my car, and drove back to the gym. Went through my entire workout on autopilot. Came home an hour later as if nothing had happened. "Good workout?" Karen asked brightly from the kitchen, where she was making herself a smoothie. "Fine," I replied. The usual. That night, Friday evening, everything shifted again. Karen was unusually affectionate. She'd cooked my favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, a dish she hadn't made in over a year. She'd set the table with our good dishes and lit candles. She'd even put on the dress I'd always said I liked. Over dinner, she talked about baby names, about what kind of parents we'd be, about setting bigger goals for our future. The timing was almost impressive in its transparency. I played along, nodding at appropriate moments, asking questions that seemed engaged. But inside, I was watching her performance with the same analytical detachment I brought to contract negotiations. Saturday, Karen went to help Natalie again. Apparently, there were thank you cards to write and gifts to organize. She'd be gone most of the day. Once her car disappeared down the street, I made a decision I never thought I'd make. I checked our phone records. We had a family plan through Cascade Communications, and as the primary account holder, I had access to detailed billing statements. I pulled up the last 6 months of records on my laptop. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Long threads of text messages between Karen and her sister Natalie. Hundreds of messages. Thousands of messages. An ongoing conversation that apparently never stopped. On our anniversary in March, the night I'd made reservations at Thornwood, the nicest restaurant in Portland, the place where I'd proposed 14 years earlier, she'd texted Natalie. Dinner was nice. Same place as always. Sometimes I feel like we're just going through the motions. Like he's checking boxes instead of actually trying. On the weekend trip to Seattle I'd planned in April, researching activities, booking a hotel with a view, arranging everything carefully she'd sent. Derek tries so hard, but it all feels so ordinary. I see Veronica's posts from the Maldives, and I just wonder if this is really all there is. On the Tuesday in May when I'd brought home flowers just because, fresh peonies from the farmer's market, her favorite, she'd written, "He brought flowers again. It's sweet, but flowers don't change anything fundamental. I'm not sure how much longer I can pretend this is enough." Each message was a small betrayal. Together, they formed a complete picture of a woman who'd stopped believing in our marriage, but hadn't bothered to tell me. I sat at my desk for 2 hours, reading through months of messages, my coffee growing cold beside me. Then, on Sunday afternoon, my phone exploded. It started with a call from Karen's mother, Patricia, then her brother, James, then 2 of her cousins whose names I barely remembered, then her Aunt Barbara from Sacramento. My phone rang 14 times in 30 minutes. I ignored all of them, waiting to understand what was happening. Finally, a voicemail from James. "Hey Derek, look, there's been some kind of mix-up in the family group chat. Some voice messages got sent out that I think were supposed to be private. You should probably call Karen. This is really bad. I didn't know there was a family group chat." Apparently, Karen had a separate text thread with her entire extended family that I'd never been included in. 20 minutes later, Karen burst through the front door, her face pale, phone pressed to her ear, whispering urgently to someone. When she saw me sitting calmly in the living room, she froze mid-sentence. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, ending the call. We stared at each other for a long moment. "There's been a technical issue," she said carefully, her voice shaking slightly. "Some old voice notes got sent by mistake to the family chat. It's nothing. Just a glitch." "What kind of voice notes?" I asked quietly. Her face crumbled. She started crying immediately, that instant transition from defensive to devastated that I'd seen 100 times before. "Derek, please. What was in the voice notes, Karen?" Minutes later, her younger sister Emily called. Unlike Karen, Emily had always been straightforward with me. We'd gotten along well over the years. "Derek," Emily said when I answered, her voice tight with emotion. "I need you to know something. Those messages weren't sent by accident. Karen meant to send them to Natalie privately, but she accidentally sent them to the whole family group chat instead. All of us heard them. Mom, Dad, James, everyone. What was in them?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. "They were about you," Emily said quietly. "About your marriage. About how she really feels." "Derek, I'm so sorry. Some of us have been trying to tell her for months that she was being unfair, but she wouldn't listen." Karen stood across the room, tears streaming down her face, shaking her head frantically. "Can you send them to me?" I asked Emily. "Are you sure you want to hear them?" "Yes." "Okay. I'm sending them now." "Derek, I'm really sorry." 7 audio files arrived in my message inbox, each one between 2 and 5 minutes long. I listened to all 7. In the first one, recorded 3 months ago, Karen was venting to Natalie about our house. "I'm embarrassed when people ask where we live. Maplewood Terrace? It's fine, but it's not where I thought I'd end up at 38 years old. Veronica lives in Riverside Heights. Jennifer lives in Pearl District. And I'm still in our starter home. The second message from 2 months ago was worse. I'm terrified of having average children. I know how terrible that sounds, but it's true. If we raise kids in this neighborhood, sending them to public schools, giving them this incredibly ordinary middle-class life, what kind of future does that set them up for? Gregory and Natalie's kids will have every advantage. Mine will have to fight for everything. The third message made my hands shake. I've been thinking about divorce as a reset button. If I left now before kids, I could start over. I'm still young enough. Still attractive enough. I could find someone who's more ambitious, who wants the life I want. The fourth. The problem is Derek is too comfortable. He thinks we've made it, just because we don't have debt and we have savings. He doesn't understand that comfortable isn't enough. I need more than comfortable. The fifth. I know everyone thinks he's this great guy, and he is in a lot of ways. He's loyal and responsible and stable. But those are qualities you want in an employee, not necessarily in a partner. Where's the drive? Where's the hunger? Where's the desire to really achieve something significant? The sixth. I've been pushing him to apply for positions at Prescott Medical Solutions or Advanced Analytics Group, places where he could make real money. But he's resistant. He says he's happy at Henderson and Associates. Happy? Who cares about being happy when you could be successful? The seventh and final message was only a week old. I love him. I do. But I'm not sure love is enough anymore. If I'm going to stay in this marriage, he needs to change. He needs to want more. And if he can't, well, I need to make a decision before we bring children into this. When the last message ended, I sat in absolute silence. Karen was sobbing now, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, face buried in her hands. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no betrayal. Just clarity. Pure, crystalline clarity about exactly who I'd been married to for 14 years. Monday came with a text message from Karen's father, Robert. Family meeting. Tonight. 6 p.m. Our house. We need to talk about this. All of us. The Richardson house felt different this time. There were no decorations, no celebrations, no photographs. Just a living room full of people who'd heard my wife's secret thoughts about our marriage. Robert and Patricia sat on the main couch. Natalie and Gregory were there, both looking uncomfortable. Emily sat in the corner, arms crossed. James stood near the fireplace. Even Karen's grandmother, Margaret, had come. At 86 years old, she rarely left her assisted living facility, but apparently, this situation warranted her presence. Karen and I sat in chairs facing everyone, like we were on trial. Robert spoke first, his voice heavy. "Derek," he said, "we asked you here because we owe you an apology. We've been blind to what's been happening in your marriage, and we're sorry." I nodded but said nothing. "Would you like to speak first?" Robert asked. "Tell us your perspective." I looked at Karen, then back at the assembled family. "I have nothing to add," I said calmly. "Except this. Everything Karen called inadequate in those messages was something I built carefully, intentionally, and with pride. Our paid-off house. Our savings. Our stable life. I thought I was building a foundation for our future. Apparently, I was building a prison." Patricia, Karen's mother, wiped tears from her eyes. "What hurt," I continued, "wasn't that she wanted more. People want more. That's human. What hurt was that she'd already decided I wasn't enough, and was planning her exit strategy in secret while pretending everything was fine." Margaret, the grandmother, spoke up in her sharp, clear voice that age hadn't diminished. "Karen," she said directly, "were you preparing to leave this marriage?" The silence that followed was deafening. I was confused," Karen finally said. "I was venting. I didn't mean." "That's not what I asked," Margaret interrupted. "Were you planning to leave?" More silence. "Answer your grandmother," Robert said firmly. "I don't know," Karen whispered. "Maybe. I was considering options." The room erupted. Patricia started crying harder. Robert stood up, pacing. Emily shook her head in visible disgust. James looked at his sister like he didn't recognize her. Margaret's voice cut through the chaos. "What exactly do you contribute to this marriage?" she asked Karen. "That makes you think you deserve better than what you have." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. "You don't work," Margaret continued relentlessly. "You haven't worked in what, 8 years? Derek supports you completely, pays for everything, and you repay him by shopping for an upgrade. Grandma, please, Karen tried. No, Margaret said coldly. You don't get to please me. This man gave you security, loyalty, and a good life. And you treated him like he was a failed investment. The conversation continued for another hour. Questions, accusations, reality. James, Karen's brother, who usually avoided confrontation, finally snapped. You're self-centered, Karen, he said bluntly. I've always known it, but this is beyond anything I imagined. You're embarrassed by the man who made it possible for you to live comfortably without working? You're ashamed of the house he bought you? Are you hearing yourself? Even Natalie, usually Karen's closest ally, spoke up. I never realized, she said quietly, that you felt this way, that you were comparing your life to mine, keeping score. Gregory and I have what we have because we both work, because we both sacrifice. You want what we have without putting in any of the effort. I sat quietly through all of it, watching my wife's perfect image crumble under the weight of her own words. For the first time in a long while, no one was asking me to justify anything. Robert finally broke the tension. You know what hurts most? He said slowly, looking at his daughter with profound disappointment. Not that you're unhappy. People get unhappy. Marriages have problems. It's that you lied, to him, to this family, and to yourself, about who you really are. Dad, please, Karen tried to interrupt. No, he cut her off sharply, pointing at her. You don't get to talk your way out of this. This man gave you loyalty, security, and consistency, and you repaid him by shopping for an upgrade behind his back. Patricia stood up and walked over to where I sat. Her eyes were red and swollen. Derek, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. I thought I raised her better than this. I thought I taught her about respect and loyalty and gratitude. You don't owe me anything, I replied honestly. Yes, I do, she said firmly. You deserved respect. From her. From all of us. We should have paid more attention. That was when Karen completely fell apart. Not the calculated tears I'd seen so many times before, but genuine, racking sobs. I never wanted this, she cried. I love him. I really truly love him. I wanted more. I wanted what other people had. No, Margaret said coldly from her chair. You love what he gives you. You love comfort and safety, and the freedom to not worry about bills. But love without respect isn't love at all. It's just convenience. By the time the meeting ended 90 minutes later, the lines were clearly drawn. Not one person defended Karen's behavior. Not one. The drive home was unbearable. Karen cried the entire 30 minutes, apologizing continuously, promising she would change, begging for another chance, talking about therapy, about starting over, about how this was the wake-up call she needed. I drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel, eyes on the road. As we pulled into our driveway, I finally spoke. Your own family stood against you tonight, I said quietly. They'll forgive me, she said through tears. Family always forgives. Maybe, I replied. I won't. She turned toward me sharply, shock cutting through the tears. What are you saying? I'm saying this marriage is finished, I said evenly, my voice completely calm. What remains is deciding how we end it. She collapsed into fresh sobs, but I was already getting out of the car. The next morning, Tuesday, I took the day off work. I called my supervisor at Henderson and Associates and used a personal day, something I rarely did. But I needed time to think, to plan, to act. When Karen came downstairs around 9 a.m., eyes puffy from crying, she tried again. We can talk, she said desperately. We can do counseling. Rebuild. I know I messed up, but we can fix this. We can. Before we talk about anything, I interrupted, placing a manila folder on the kitchen table. We need to deal with reality. I opened the folder and went through it piece by piece, methodically, like I was presenting a contract analysis to a client. You're an authorized user on all our credit cards, I said. Not the owner. I'm the owner. This morning at 6 a.m., I removed your authorization. The cards no longer work. She stared at me in shock. You can't do that. I already did. I have the confirmation emails if you'd like to see them. I showed her printed statements from the last 6 months. Thousands of dollars in charges I'd never questioned. Expensive fitness classes at Portland Athletic Club, $340 per month. Constant shopping at Nordstrom, Sephora, Whole Foods, buying whatever she wanted without considering the cost. Daily conveniences she'd called necessities, premium coffee, regular salon visits, subscription services I'd never heard of. You spent an average of $4,700 per month, I said, while telling your family I wasn't enough. This is cruel, she whispered. No, I answered calmly. This is clarity. This is you understanding exactly what inadequate Derek was actually providing. I continued. Our joint checking account. I'd already moved 70% of the balance into my individual account. My paycheck had been redirected to deposit only into accounts bearing my name alone. The mortgage is entirely in my name, I said. I bought this house before we married. The insurance policies are in my name. The car you drive is titled in my name. I've been carrying this family financially for 14 years. Karen sat down heavily, shaking. I haven't worked in 8 years, she said. That's no longer my responsibility, I replied. You wanted independence. You wanted to explore your options. You have them now. I told her she would stay with Emily while the divorce proceedings moved forward, and she would need to find a job. She tried one final tactic. What if I get help? Real professional help. Therapy? This isn't a mental health issue, I said calmly. It's a values issue. It's about fundamental respect. Therapy doesn't fix entitlement. Therapy doesn't undo months of planning your escape. I handed her a business card, cream-colored, embossed lettering. Stuart Richardson, family law attorney, she read aloud, her voice breaking. You already hired a lawyer? He's expecting your call, I said. His number is on the card. That afternoon, Emily came to pick Karen up. My sister-in-law's eyes were downcast, apologetic. She helped Karen pack 2 suitcases of clothes and essentials. When the car pulled out of the driveway, I stood at the window and watched them leave. The house was quiet, still, honest. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. The settlement was straightforward. Karen received what Oregon law required, enough to get started, but nothing close to what she'd fantasized about. She moved into a small apartment in East Portland and found work as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized firm downtown. From what Emily told me, the reality of working full-time and paying her own bills had been a harsh adjustment. I didn't ask for details. Her future was no longer my concern. As for me, I discovered something unexpected in the aftermath: peace. The house felt lighter without the constant undercurrent of judgment. I could make decisions without wondering if they'd be mocked in secret messages to her sister. I could be proud of my accomplishments without them being measured against someone else's success. I'd spent 14 years building a life that someone else deemed inadequate. Now I was building one that I was proud of. One where my worth wasn't measured by someone else's arbitrary standards. And for the first time in years, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.